For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother or sister's eye, but pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to them, let me take the speck out of your own eye, when all that time there is a plank in your own? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother or sisters. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So this morning we are continuing in our fall series on the Sermon on the Mount. And for those of you joining us for the first time, either in person or online, the Sermon on the Mount is found in chapters 5, 6, and 7 in the Gospel of Matthew. And it is a compilation of Christ's most important teachings. This is the most famous sermon that has ever been given. And when I think about all of the themes and topics that Jesus uses in the Sermon on the Mount, I want to make sure to pay attention because they're so vital for living as a disciple of Christ. That phrase, do not judge, is one of the most repeated phrases in the Bible and in the Gospels, and I'm sure you've heard both Christians and non-Christians quote this particular part of the Sermon on the Mount, especially with the dust and the plank. It's pretty famous. And it all has to do with judgment. Judgment is a part of our everyday lives. It's election season right now, and so every time I check the mailbox, I don't know about you, but I always get a flood of those negative campaign ads, right, that is condemning one candidate or another. This week, I asked several friends and community members, people in the area, how do you feel personally judged in the world? And when or where do you judge people the most? Some folks said that they felt judged by the way that they parent, that they see other people parenting in a way that feels better to them. Some people feel judged because of their appearance, because of their weight, their tattoos, the clothes on their back. Some people felt judged because of their career. They felt judged because their job lacked status or a high-paying salary. Others said that they judged a lot and felt judged on social media, right? Facebook in particular. They said that social media tends to be a breeding ground of unfair judgment and comparison. I know that many judge when they're walking their dogs and they see different political signs in yards or bumper stickers on the back of cars, right? And people tend to confess that they judge others in a way that counters their own personal beliefs. When people act in a manner that they wouldn't necessarily act, that causes folks to judge. The saddest response I received from my little survey, and I will confess I only asked about 30 people, was the folks that felt judged by the church. Too many people replied that they had felt judged because they were divorced, or they felt like they didn't necessarily fit in, or they were a different race than most of the people in their community, and that judgment has left them feeling unsafe and unwelcome to come to worship, at least in person. Judgment is rampant in our world, and we are constantly going from the person being judging, right, to the person being judged. And there are times when I lie and I say, I'm really not a judgmental person. I don't struggle with judgment. But then I go to like the gym, or I go to Albertsons, or I go to the mall. That's an interesting place, right? And I people watch, and I find myself sinning because I'm rolling my eyes or I'm raising my eyebrows catching lots and lots of judgment and shame and comparison in my heart. Jesus talks about judgment in the Gospels, and particularly in the Sermon on the Mount, because Jesus knows that this is a major struggle for humans. So I think the first question we have to ask is, can we stop judging, and is all judgment bad? Well, we can't stop. I remember asking a friend from New York City, I was like, well, what do you think about people who are judging? And she said, well, Angie, it's like breathing to New Yorkers, you know. And I was like, well, that was honest. So we do. We're constantly assessing and making judgment calls on things and on people, and that's important because we want to make wise decisions as disciples of Christ, and we also want to be safe. We want to make sure our family's safe. But Jesus isn't telling us to judge in the way that we might think about judgment, right? Not in a condemning way. Jesus is actually encouraging us to think critically, to use our brains, right? To advocate for justice, to weigh the good and the evil that we see around us. That is what Jesus would say is judging righteously or correctly. So not all judgment is bad. The word here in Matthew 7 is krino in the Greek. And krino actually means both discerning and condemning depending on how you use it. So when Jesus says do not judge in this parable, he's saying don't go around, he's not saying go around accepting everything blindly, right? Even the really bad, terrible stuff. He's not saying stop advocating for justice, right? What he is saying is use your brain, use wisdom, and pray for discernment. No one likes to be judged in a condemning way, right? It's the worst feeling in the world. And to me, when I know that somebody is judging me, right, whether it's in a workplace or is out in the community, I tend to screw up more. So it makes me nervous. And it reminds me of one of my favorite movies, Cool Runnings. Has anyone seen that? Such a good one. Cool Runnings, right? It's about a team of Jamaican sprinters who all get disqualified from the Summer Olympics in the sprinting in the 80s. And so they decide they're going to form the very first Jamaican bobsled team. And with guidance from their coach, who also has kind of a soiled reputation, the guys work really hard and qualify for the Winter Olympics in Calgary, Canada. But once they get there, no one takes them seriously because of how they look, because of where they're from, and also because of how much funding they have, right? The teams like the Swiss have all this money and all this fancy gear because they were so well known for bobsledding, but the Jamaicans, this was a new thing, and so they kind of came to Calgary with nothing. And their first day on the track, they are met with so much ridicule and criticism by their other competitors that they choke under pressure. They run down the track the first time with a giant crash, and they run down the track the second time chasing after their sled, all of which is photographed and all of which is shown to everyone on the news, especially their loved ones in Jamaica. So the movie obviously gets better, and if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it for a while, I would say go home on this chilly day and watch it, because it's a good one. But it really does demonstrate how being constantly berated and condemned is never good. It's not helpful for the judger, and it's definitely not helpful for the person being judged. When we condemn someone, first of all, we are placing ourselves in a role that we're not supposed to be, right? That's God's job, not ours. But secondly, we are criticizing someone at their deepest core. It's more than just like their appearance or their actions. It is reaching down to their heart. And it is devastating for folks. So Jesus responds to this issue of condemning judgment in a way of showing us how we tend to be a little hypocritical, right? I know I can be. He says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother or sister's eye, but pay no attention to the plank in your own? There have been so many times in my life, like so many, where I will look at a person who has way too much going on, and I will say to Russ, to one of you, to someone, oh my gosh, they need to learn to say no more. And everyone is like, really? It's like the whole pot calling the kettle black thing. I do it all the time. Makes Russ crazy. The way we judge people most of the time has a lot to say about us and everything going on in here, and really not as much with the other person. So in my survey this week, a lot of people actually did confess that they judge others for the exact same reason they themselves feel judged. My friend said, I've got all these tattoos and I feel like people are judging me. But then I go and I judge people for maybe wearing fancier clothes and nicer purses and things. And I think to myself, gosh, why do I do that? It's like we know we're doing it, but it's hard to stop. And I think the truth about judgment is when we condemn someone and we pretend like we know everything about them, we are not realizing we are judging that person with a broken lens, right? How can we really see someone with a huge plank in our eye? Some of the most encouraging responses people shared with me about judgment were the times in their lives that they realized they judged incorrectly. They found out a person was not at all who they thought they were. They practiced curiosity, and instead of making a judgment about a person immediately and walking away, they got to know them. They asked questions. They tried to understand their point of view and practiced empathy, realizing that there was probably a lot else to the story that they didn't know. So this morning, I want you to ask yourself, what is the lens you are looking through, right? How do you feel judged in the world? And when do you feel like you judge others the most? When we're looking at this particular scripture passage, one word that I think gets easily overlooked in Matthew chapter 7 is the word measure, right? Measure. Jesus is asking us to measure the way that people are going to measure us will be measured to you, right? So the word measure is important because Jesus is referencing a famous saying in the Mishnah, one of the holy Jewish texts. And the Mishnah was a collection of Jewish sayings from rabbis. And in it says to judge each person with the scales weighed in their favor. So this imagery with measurement and scales would have really spoken to the ancient Jewish people because in their days, they went to the marketplace, right? Their daily lives revolved around the market, and the grains and the various things that they would buy were measured out through the scales. But there were devious vendors in the marketplaces, right? In Jerusalem and near Galilee that would rig their scales to lie so that people would end up paying for like 6 pounds of grain instead of the 4 pounds of grain they actually got. So what Jesus is asking us to do in this passage is to weigh the scales in their favor. The way you measure, that's how it's going to come back to you. And the truth is we all have scales in our hearts. So we kind of have to think about the way we're weighing our scales. Like, are we being devious and are we giving people the benefit of the doubt, or do we immediately write them off, right? It's one thing, I think, for us to always hope that people will give us grace and understanding. But the thing is, we also have to give it out. And that's such a big aspect of the Sermon on the Mount, is to really do unto others as you are hoping they would do to you. I'm 34, and I know a lot of you think that that's not very old, but I am old enough to know when I'm in a really bad mental state. And I know for me, a red flag is when I start living in a place of anger and frustration. Every time I get into this headspace, I start to feel really resentful, and I offer very little grace to those around me. It's not great. It's actually terrible. But thankfully, I realize when I start to do it now. So that's a start. And what I found when I process this with my husband or my therapist is that when I am usually offering no grace or compassion to others, it's when I'm offering no grace or compassion to myself. I think the root of our problem with judgment stems from that, from within. I am my harshest critic, my most vicious condemner. And if I don't keep that in check, if I don't remember that I am a work in progress, right, that false belief about judgment and condemnation will flow out of me and manifest in the ways that I treat others. And I think if you were honest with yourself this morning, you would realize it's the same for you too. We tend to judge more critically when we are being really critical on ourselves. Here's the good news. The good news is that even though we're not always great at giving grace, Jesus is. Jesus is always there waiting for us to come back to him. Always there waiting with an unending supply of grace to heal us from those planks that are in our eyes so that we might be able to see clearly and use wisdom and discernment. There is always a new chance to do this. So this week, I want you to do some homework, and I promise I will do the same homework. The next time you start to judge someone in a condemning way, and again, like I said, it's election season, it's easy to do. I want you to stop and practice curiosity instead. Rather than making a snap judgment about somebody, just based on the exterior or the very little information you've heard, I want you to ask questions and try to understand that person. Put yourself in their shoes for a moment and maybe imagine the circumstances that might have led them to be the way that they are. In addition to that, I want you to practice empathy. We never fully know what another person is going through. Being a CASA has taught me that. There's a lot of things that happen in a person's life before they get to the courts, right? Before they get to foster care. So maybe before judging the actions of another, we can remember that most people are doing the best that they can. I'm going to say that again. Most people are doing the best that they can. They are trying so hard, just like you are. And there may be a really big reason for their off-putting behavior. Finally, I want you to reflect on your own heart and your own state of mind. And this is hard, right? I do this work every week when I go to therapy. I want you to think about the way you're judging and maybe projecting. And I want you to ask God how you might need to heal from your own fears or insecurities. Reflect on your current state of mind and your current state in your heart and determine if maybe the things that you are saying, judgmental, condemning things, is something that you need to heal from and pray about. This church has and will continue to make disciples of Christ, advocating for justice, using the Holy Spirit's wisdom and discernment, practicing empathy and compassion, and tipping the scales in other people's favor. I know that when we continue to do this, we are doing the work of Jesus Christ, and we are bringing heaven to earth. Amen. At this time, we invite you to give your tithes and your offerings this morning. If you are worshiping with us online, you can give on our online giving platform, www.hopeumcbillings.com.